Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigor Bhaktavrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shai Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mayapur Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktavrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We're nearing the completion of Volume 2. It's taken us about 1.5 years, although it was only 6 months of Srila Prabhupada's Leela in New York City. But we went into great detail. And today also, although it's possible we can complete the volume today, because we have a lot of extra information from the book written by Mukunda Goswami, Miracle on 2nd Avenue. So we're going to read also from this book today, because Mukunda, along with his wife Janaki, and 2B, Shamasundar and Malati, they started the second temple now in San Francisco. So we'll hear about that today. Last week we ended with Srila Prabhupada incorporating some rules and regulations for his disciples. Now Srila Prabhupada, he has posted at 26 2nd Avenue the list of the 10 offenses while chanting the holy name. You can remember that every morning Srila Prabhupada, when he would come to give the Caitanya Charitamrita class, before starting the class, he would take his beads out of his bead bag, and all the devotees would chant one round together. They were expected to chant 16 rounds every day. Originally, he wanted them to chant 64 rounds, but they said it's not possible. All right, 32 rounds, not possible. Minimum 16 rounds every day, and that was their vow when they took initiation. But at least in the morning sessions, as his disciples listened to him speak on Caitanya Charitamrita, these threats, what were the threats? The threats that they were so afraid that Srila Prabhupada would leave them and go to another city. So those were the threats. Were all put out of mind. And the timeless, intimate teachings took up their full attention. Krishna consciousness was a struggle, keeping yourself strictly following Swamiji's code against Maya. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, no meat eating. But it was possible as long as they could hear him singing and reading and speaking from Caitanya Charitamrita, because the morning class went on every single day, but the evening classes were only Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So this was their shot in the arm, that every morning they would get to hear Caitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada gave over 50 lectures. That means 50 days he spoke on Caitanya Charitamrita before he left for San Francisco. So I'm going to read this notice that Srila Prabhupada put up. 10 kinds of offenses should be avoided while chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. List of offenses. 1. Blaspheming a Lord's devotee. 2. Considering the Lord and the demigods on the same level, or to understand that there are many gods. 3. Neglect the orders of the spiritual master. 4. Minimizing the authority of scriptures or Vedas. 5. Interpreting the holy name of God. 6. Commit sin on the strength of chanting. 7. Instructing glories of Lord's name to the unfaithful. 8. Comparing the holy name with material piety. 9. To become inattentive while chanting the holy name. And 10. Attachment to material things in spite of chanting the holy name. Try to avoid all the above offenses. They counted on his presence for their Krishna consciousness. He was the center of their newly spiritualized lives, and he was all they knew of Krishna consciousness. As long as they could keep coming and seeing him, Krishna consciousness was a sure thing, as long as he was there. Seated on the worn rug, they looked up at him, waiting for him to begin the next installment. Prabhupada cleared his throat and glanced down at Brahmananda, who sat beside the silently running tape recorder. Satsvarup entered the date in his notebook. Prabhupada began reading the Bengali verses and paraphrasing. So all of these lectures are still available because Brahmananda sat there and with the big reels on the tape recorder, he recorded everything. So if you're interested in hearing all of these lectures, the original lectures of the Caitanya Charitamrita, where Srila Prabhupada concentrated on the teachings of Lord Caitanya to Sanatana Goswami. And later, these lectures were combined into the first book called Teachings of Lord Caitanya, which we read very carefully, and Prabhupada had that book translated into other languages also, so that everyone could understand the message of Lord Caitanya from these lectures that he gave at 26 Second Avenue.
This is much before the translation of books, Chaitanya Charitamrita, these lectures.
Much before. This was 1966. And Caitanya Charitamrita was not completed until 1975. This is just a paraphrase. He was just giving the gist of the teachings. Sanatan took the 7 gold coins from his servant and gave them to the hotel keeper. "You have 8 coins," the astrologer said. And Sanatan went back and found that his servant was retaining another gold coin. "Why do you carry this death knell on the road?" Sanatan asked. "You are too attached to money." So we have to remember that Sanatan, he had just escaped from jail. He had given 700 gold coins to the jailer, the pious holy man, the jailer, who was satisfied with 500, but he settled for 700. So now, Sanatan, he had escaped on the back roads, gone into the jungle, into the mountains between Bengal and Bihar, on his way to, because he had heard that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was then in Varanasi. So, but he couldn't take the main road. He had to take the jungle path, otherwise he would be caught. And he thought it wise to take a servant with him, but he didn't realize that this servant was carrying the death knell along with him by bringing money. Sanatan brought nothing with him. He gave everything to the jailer. But the servant had money. And he took the gold piece from his servant and told him to return home. Sanatan then brought the gold coin to the hotel keeper. But the hotel keeper, who admitted that he had intended to kill Sanatan for his money, now said, "You are a good man, and you may keep your money." But Sanatan refused. Then the hotel keeper provided Sanatan with 4 assistants. They helped Sanatan through the jungle and then left him alone. Free from his nuisance servant and from the dacoits, Sanatan felt liberated as he passed along the road alone. Soon he came upon his brother-in-law, who was traveling along the same road. His brother-in-law was a wealthy man carrying a great deal of money to buy horses. "Please stay with me at least a few days," Sanatan's brother-in-law said. "It's really bad how you look." Of course, he had just been in jail. He hadn't eaten for 3 days. He was dirty. His clothes were just rags. So how his brother-in-law even recognized him, by the time Sanatana Goswami got to meet Caitanya Mahaprabhu, they thought that he was a fakir, a Muslim fakir. He looked so downtrodden with a beard and hair and dirty clothes. The brother-in-law knew that Sanatan was going to spiritual life, but he requested that he improve his dress by accepting a valuable blanket from him. Sanatan took the blanket and continued on his way. At last, Sanatan reached Benares, and he went straight to the home of Chandrasekhar, where Lord Chaitanya was staying, and waited outside the door. Lord Chaitanya knew Sanatan had arrived, and he requested Chandrasekhar to go to the door and ask the devotee who was waiting there to come in. Chandrasekhar went out but saw only the wretched-looking Sanatan, whom he took to be a half-mad Mohammedan fakir. Chandrasekhar returned to Lord Chaitanya and explained that there was no devotee outside. "Was there anyone at all?" the Lord asked. "Yes," said Chandrasekhar, "some wretched fakir." Then Lord Chaitanya went to the door and embraced Sanatan. So in the early days, in order to attract people's attention, one thing that the devotees did was they started making puppet shows and dramas. So this is a puppet of Sanatana Goswami. They would have a stage, and they would make the puppets on their hands go back and forth, speaking the dialogues together. And it was very enthralling for the new people to see these puppet shows. They were very popular in the Sunday feasts, especially at the Los Angeles temple. And then later for the young children, when things became a little more developed technologically, they would make videos of these puppet shows so the children could sit down and they would just be glued to the screen watching these puppet shows and learning about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. The Lord cried tears of ecstasy, for he had at last found a devotee whom he knew was worthy to receive his entire teachings. And Sanatan cried tears of joy that his life's ambition was being fulfilled. But because he was dirty from his traveling and not worthy, he asked the Lord not to touch him. The Lord replied, "It is I who benefit from touching you. Whoever touches a true devotee is blessed." Prabhupada closed the book, ending another morning session. So this was quite a pastime that Sanatana Goswami shared with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now at this time, he had arrived in Benares, dirty and wretched, looking like a bearded Muslim, and he begged the Lord, "Please don't touch me. I'll contaminate you." Now later, because 2 months, Lord Chaitanya instructed Sanatana Goswami at Benares. Now earlier to this, Rupa Goswami had met Lord Chaitanya in Prayagraj. He only got 10 days of instruction. But Sanatana Goswami, being the elder brother, Rupa Goswami considered him to be his guru at the beginning of all of his books. You have to turn that fan on, please, and bring it here. He spent 2 months instructing Sanatana Goswami on the, and that's what's found. Yeah. And that's what's 20 through 22, all of the teachings. And that also is the Hari Bhakti Vilas and the other books that Sanatana Goswami later wrote on the order of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So this was the first meeting when Sanatana Goswami was able to get instruction from Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Then when Sanatana Goswami went to visit Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, again he had to go through the jungle of Jharkhand. And there he had no water to drink. He could only drink the polluted water that he found in the jungle. And from that polluted water, his entire body became infested with oozing sores. And by the time he reached Jagannath Puri, the whole body was full of blood and pus. But when the Lord saw him, he immediately embraced him. And Sanatana Goswami was trying to beg him, please don't touch me. All this pus and blood will go all over your transcendental body. But Caitanya Mahaprabhu, just like a mother, she sees the baby's stool to be like chandan, out of love. So Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he wanted to embrace Sanatana Goswami, even though his body was going to be covered with the pus and blood. So this is a pastime, repeated pastime between the two of them. This is a list. December 1st, December 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way up to the end of the year of the classes that Srila Prabhupada gave that are still available for all of you to listen to or to read. It's all on the vedabase.com. So you have the exact same opportunity as the original disciples of Prabhupada had to hear these first lectures of Chaitanya Charitamrita. One of Prabhupada's main concerns was to finish and publish as soon as possible his translation and commentary of Bhagavad-gita. And one day something happened that enabled him to increase his work on the manuscript. Because remember, Prabhupada, he only typed with 2 fingers. He didn't know proper typing. I don't believe in India they do this, but in America, at least in our generation, it was mandatory, just like you have to take English, math, science, civics. You had to learn typing. And you couldn't pass unless you knew how to type, because that was how you were going to be able to prepare all of your papers, your theses, all of your exams by this typing process. So everyone had to learn how to type. But Srila Prabhupada didn't have that opportunity. So with 2 fingers, he was trying to type all of his manuscripts. Unexpectedly, a boy named Neil arrived. He was a student from Antioch College on a special work-study program, and he had the school's approval to work 1 term within the ashram of Swami Bhaktivedanta, which he had heard about through the newspapers. Neil mentioned that he was a good typist. Neil could type 80 words per minute, very, very fast. If that could be of any help to the Swami. So Antioch College, there are many colleges that give liberal arts and science stream and medical stream, but Antioch College was an avant-garde college where you could choose your subjects that you wanted to study. And you could work and study at the same time to prepare yourself for real life. So Neil had chosen, because he had read about the Hare Krishna devotees and the chanting and the bhakti yoga process in the newspapers, because Prabhupada was by that time getting a lot of articles written in the New York Times, East Village Other, National Observer, so many different newspapers, daily news. So Neil got permission from his college to take a whole term to live with the devotees and to work within the 26 Second Avenue. All by Krishna's mercy. No one asked him to do it. He wanted to do it. Super soul. Prabhupada considered this to be Krishna's blessing. Immediately, he rented a dictaphone and began dictating tapes. So Prabhupada, he knew what he needed. Gargamuni, he eventually bought Srila Prabhupada a dictaphone. And Gargamuni had trouble understanding how to work it. But as soon as he gave it to Prabhupada, Prabhupada knew immediately how to run it. Hayagriva donated his electric typewriter. We once got an electric typewriter here for Prabhupada, but the electricity was always going off, so we couldn't use it. So we had to go back. You can see in Prabhupada's house the manual typewriter that we had. And we had one typewriter for the whole temple. And we used to have to take turns using the typewriter to do all of our official work within the temple. The samadhi was getting constructed. The temple had the life membership department. So we would move that one typewriter from department to department. Neil set up his work area in Swamiji's front room and began typing 8 hours a day. This inspired Prabhupada and obliged him to produce more. He worked quickly, sometimes day and night, on his Bhagavad-gita as it is. He had founded ISKCON 5 months ago, yet in his classes he was still reading the Bhagavad-gita translation of Dr. Radhakrishnan, because Prabhupada explained to the devotees that the translation was correct, the purports were Mayavadi. So therefore, he would use the translations, but Prabhupada, he was working against time to get the purports of each of the slokas made in his own edition of Bhagavad-gita as it is. But when Bhagavad-gita as it is would at last be published, he told his disciples it would be of major importance for the Krishna consciousness movement. At last there would be a bona fide edition of the Gita. So we will read later how the Bhagavad-gita was first published by a very big publishing company called Macmillan. But they did not want to print the entire 1,000-page edition that Prabhupada had prepared. They were making an edition of different Oriental scriptures, and they wanted all those Oriental scriptures to fit into their format of just about 250, 300 pages. So Prabhupada had to give his manuscript to Hayagriva to edit it down to 1/3 the size of what it was. And up until 1972, we only had the abridged version. It had all of the slokas in it, but maybe every 4th sloka there would be a short purport. And we had to wait until Macmillan finally agreed to print the full version. And that full version, nowhere in the world were more Bhagavad-gitas distributed and printed, as like 100,000 were printed. And they had to have a whole train of paper come to their printing press to print all of the volumes of Bhagavad-gita that our temples around the world required. It broke all records of Bhagavad-gita distribution, although there had already been 600 editions printed, but nothing sold like Prabhupada's, because the Sanskrit was there, word for word translation, the sloka translation, and then every single sloka had a full explanation according to Bhakti Yoga. Whatever Swamiji said or did, his disciples wanted to hear about it. Gradually, they had increased their faith and devotion to Swamiji, whom they accepted as God's representative. And they took his actions as words to be absolute. So now the devotees, this new group in 26 Second Avenue that had just started developing their relationship with Prabhupada since July of that year, after Prabhupada moved from the Bowery. Now it's December. So July, August, September, October, November, December. It was only 5 or 6 months that they had taken shelter of Srila Prabhupada. But Srila Prabhupada, he invested in them so much time, so much energy, so much personal care, cooking for them, giving classes, taking care of their personal problems, teaching them all the different arts of cooking, eventually they were going to have to lecture because Prabhupada in January was going to leave them. So they had to take over the lectures of the classes. So they were all getting trained by Prabhupada to become preachers themselves. After one of the disciples had been alone with him, the others would gather around to find out every detail of what had happened. It was Krishna consciousness. Jadharani was especially guileless in relating what Swamiji had said or done. That's because, you remember, Prabhupada had his little room where he had his trunk and his typewriter, and also where he slept. It was just a little area. And then there was a bigger room where the altar was, where all the devotees would sit down and take prasadam. Now where Neil was typing. And in one little area there, Jadharani sat in front of her easel, and she was copying the paintings that Prabhupada was giving her to make big versions of the small prints that Prabhupada had brought from India. So she was always upstairs with Srila Prabhupada, whereas the other devotees, some of them were working, some of them were downstairs greeting guests, some of them were cooking. But Jadharani was always there. One day, Prabhupada had stepped on a tack that Jadharani had dropped on the floor. And although she knew it was a serious offense to her spiritual master, the major importance of the event seemed to be how Prabhupada had displayed his transcendental consciousness. So for those of you who have never painted, you see, a real painter, they buy the wood and then they stretch the canvas, and you have to tack with little nails like that the canvas onto the wood and make sure it's very tight. And then you have to prepare the canvas. When we all went to learn painting from Jadharani, whoever had any artistic capabilities, we were sent to learn from Jadharani. So she taught us how to prepare these canvases with the tacks, how to prepare the canvas itself with an undercoat, and then according to what picture you were making, you would have a base color. You would have to paint that base color and then put the details on top of that base color. All the pictures were painted like that originally because she had been an art student at Cooper Union. She said she was the worst student in the whole class. That was her opinion. But whatever she could do, she used in Prabhupada's service. And so many of the paintings were painted by her in the very beginning in the Krishna book and in other books that were first printed, like the cover of the original Ishopanishad that we saw. Prabhupada. He silently and emotionlessly reached down and pulled the tack from his foot without so much as a cry. And once, when she was fixing a painting over his head behind the desk, she had accidentally stepped on his sitting mat. "Is that an offense?" she had asked. And Swamiji had replied, "No, for service you could even stand on my head." So we have the comparison also. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, sometimes after he would take his prasadam that the devotees would make, he would lie down in his room and take rest in the afternoon. And his servant Govinda, who was also his, more than a god brother, the superior to him, but he was told by Ishwara Puri to come and serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Govinda would come in while Mahaprabhu was resting and massage his feet. But one day he fell asleep right across the doorway. And Govinda couldn't get into the room, but he wanted to massage Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet. So what he did was he put his cloth over Lord Chaitanya's body, stepped over Lord Chaitanya's body, and then went to do his service. And when Mahaprabhu woke up, he said, "How did you get in the room?" And he explained what happened. So in order to do service, a devotee is willing to even commit what's so-called an offense rather than give up their service. Just as when our temple first opened, at the grand opening, we had every sannyasi in the whole temple, in the whole society here, all the big wigs, everybody came for the grand opening. And the Matajis were also there. So you'll see there's always a tussle at Mangalarti time. Who's going to be in front of Radhashyam Sundar? We've tried for years now to solve this problem. We would put ropes up and we would divide the temple in half and we would give sessions, who would go where. Never worked out. So Srila Prabhupada's disciple, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, went to Prabhupada and he said, "Prabhupada, we're really having trouble in the temple because of all the women. You know, we don't even get to go near the deities to take darshan." And Prabhupada said, "Oh, even Lord Chaitanya had that problem." Because you remember he used to stand behind the Garuda Stamba, and even then, one woman jumped on his shoulder to get onto the column so that she could have darshan of Lord Chaitanya. So this is an age-old, out of great ecstatic symptoms, you want to take darshan or you want to do service, even at the risk of so-called committing an offense. But Prabhupada said, "No, for service you could even stand on my head." Sometimes Brahmananda would say that Swamiji had told him something very intimate about Krishna consciousness in private. But when he would tell what Swamiji had said, someone else would recall that the same thing was in Srimad Bhagavatam. So they were reading Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam then, and they were getting a little more advanced in the knowledge. Prabhupada had said that the spiritual master is present in his instructions, and that he had tried to put everything into those 3 volumes of the Bhagavatam. And the devotees were finding this to be true. Even the life of Lord Chaitanya, because, of course, Prabhupada understood no one would have heard of Lord Chaitanya in America except for very elevated scholars. So his introduction was the entire life of Lord Chaitanya, so that they could understand the importance of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. There were no secrets in Swamiji's family of devotees. Everyone knew that Umapati had left for a few days, disappointed with the Swami's severe criticism of the Buddhists, but had come back, and in a heavy, sincere exchange with Srila Prabhupada, he had decided to take to Krishna consciousness again. Now, Lord Buddha, he's one of the Dasavatars, but he preached against the Vedas, and he told people not to follow the Vedas. So he's also considered, it's considered atheistic philosophy because he rejected the Vedic teachings. But that was a trick, because at that time, the Vedas had many Shastric references to animal slaughter. And the poor animals were getting slaughtered in the name of Vedic sacrifices. And Lord Buddha was so compassionate that rather than allowing the animals to be killed in the name of sacrifice, he told his followers just completely reject the Vedas so that they would not commit the animal sacrifices anymore. So it was a trick just to show compassion to the poor animals who were being killed at that time in the name of karmakandya sacrifices. And everyone knew that Satsvarup had resigned from his job, and that when he went to tell Swamiji about it, Swamiji had told him that he could not quit, but should go on earning money for Krishna and donating it to the society, and that this would be his best service. So we heard that exchange last week where Prabhupada told the story of the prostitute and the degenerate husband, and the wife who was so chaste that she herself became a prostitute just to make enough money so that her husband can enjoy one night with the prostitute who cost $1,000. So Prabhupada told that story to Satsvarup to explain to him that we need the money to push on this Krishna consciousness. So even though you have to associate with non-devotees throughout the day, this is your service because the money that you're bringing is helping us in propagating Krishna consciousness. So therefore, after one day, he went back and told his superintendent that I'm not going to resign. And everyone knew that Swamiji wanted Gargamuni to cut his hair. Swamiji called it Gargamuni's Shakespearean locks, but that he would not do so. So Shakespeare, Prabhupada would often quote Shakespeare, and Shakespeare had long hair. And Gargamuni, who was the younger brother of Brahmananda, he had been a young college student, and as par for the fashion of the day, the hippie fashion, he had grown his hair long. And although the other devotees, some of them had shaved their heads, they were wearing sikas, they were even wearing dhotis at that time, Gargamuni was very attached to his hair. So even though Prabhupada, in subtle ways, by calling his hair Shakespearean locks and asking him to cut his hair, Gargamuni resisted. Later, so this is 1966, later in 1970, when he was just a young maybe 21 years old, Prabhupada awarded Brahmananda, Gargamuni, Vishnujan, and Subal with the order of sannyas and had them preach all over the world. At that time, of course, even before that also, but Gargamuni, he became a sannyasi, his head was shaven, he did so much service for Srila Prabhupada. He's still doing service for Srila Prabhupada here in Vrindavan, and he still has his long hair. He reverted back to his old habits. But for many, many years, he was a strict sannyasi, and he went to what's present-day Bangladesh. He was the first devotee to go there for preaching. And he did the BBT library party all over India here with groups of brahmacharis. He brought special Mercedes-Benz buses all the way from Germany so that the devotees could do Sankirtan all over India. He was a real pioneer. He was the president of our Calcutta temple for a long time. He got 4 cars for Srila Prabhupada, ambassador cars, one for Calcutta, one for Mayapur, one for Bombay, and one for Vrindavan. So he was very instrumental from the very beginning. He was in the 3rd initiation ceremony of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. So he did finally cut his hair. The year ended, and Prabhupada was still working on his manuscript of Bhagavad-gita, still lecturing in the mornings from Caitanya Charitamrita, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings from Bhagavad-gita, and still talking of going to San Francisco. Then New Year's Eve came, and the devotees suggested that since this was a holiday, when people go out to celebrate, maybe they should hold a Krishna-conscious festival. So you might remember that when Srila Prabhupada was invited to make the first recording of the Happening album, Mr. Kalman invited him to come to Times Square. Times Square this is a picture of Times Square. All those little things on the bottom, those are thousands of people. See that? Those are all people. And this is New Year's Eve. And they have a big, huge ball at the top of a skyscraper. And everyone stands there and waits for that ball to fall down at exactly 12 o'clock. And then they all revel in drinking, intoxications, and dancing, and doing all types of illicit activities to bring in the new year. So that's what goes on in the Karmi world in New York City at Times Square. So the devotees, they got the idea that, well, we're not going to Times Square. We're not going to celebrate like that. Let's have a Hare Krishna New Year's festival. Rupanuga. So we had a big feast. And a lot of people came, although it wasn't as crowded as the Sunday feasts. We were all taking prasadam, and Swamiji was sitting up on his dais, and he was also taking prasadam. This is how the devotees have festivals. Chanting, dancing, feasting. He was demanding that we eat lots of prasadam, and then he was saying, chant, chant. So we were eating and chanting Hare Krishna between bites. And he was insisting on more and more prasadam. I was amazed. He stayed with us and kept insisting that we eat so much. He stayed until around 11 o'clock, and then he became drowsy, and the party was over. So. Morning after morning, the story of Sanatana Goswami unfolded from the pages of Swamiji's big book, which only he could read and explain. The book was in Bengali, so nobody could even read Sanskrit, what to speak of Bengali. Lord Caitanya told Sanatan that he should be very grateful that Krishna had been merciful to him, to which Sanatan replied, "You say that Krishna is very merciful, but I do not know who Krishna is. You have saved me." So this is the mentality of the disciple. These were the first disciples that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had accepted, Rupa and Sanatan, to push on his mission. They were actually highly elevated Sarasvat Brahmins. The family had come from Andhra side, and they had migrated to Bengal, where they were caught up by the Hussein Shah to be ministers against their will. So they had been excommunicated from the Brahmin community because they were doing the work of the Muslim ruler. But they were Brahmins by birth, Brahmins by nature, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could understand that they were actually very elevated. And of course, we understand from Rupa Goswami's book, Radha Krishna Ganadesh Deepika, and what is the name of that book? Gaura Ganadesh Deepika, who the different personalities were who came with Lord Chaitanya. So Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, they are eternal associates of the Lord. In Krishna Lila, they are Manjaris. And now in Gaura Lila, they are sannyasis who assist Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in preaching Krishna consciousness. So, although Sanatana Goswami presented himself as most fallen, that we are even more fallen than Jaghai and Madhai, you're famous for delivering Jaghai and Madhai, but I assure you that we are even more fallen than them, because Jaghai and Madhai, they also were Brahmins. They simply engaged in sinful activities, but Rupa and Sanatan, they were engaged in the service of the very person who was breaking all the temples, trying to take over Jagannath Puri, and they were the ministers of that government. So they consider themselves to be even more fallen than Jaghai and Madhai. Lord Chaitanya had many devotees in Benares, and he sent Sanatan to the home of one of his friends where he could get something to eat, take a bath, shave, and dress in new clothing. Sanatan, however, refused the new clothing, and he also refused to become dependent on one place for his meals. Now that he had entered the renounced order, he preferred to go begging his meals at a different place each day. That's called madhukori, when you don't even go to the same house every day. You simply go, just like a bumblebee goes from flower to flower and takes a little nectar. So a person, a sannyasi in the renounced order of life, he does madhukori. You'll see that here also in Vrindavan. They'll go to one house, stand at the door. Someone will give them some atta. Someone will give them some roti. Or someone will give them some chana, some chickpeas. And they'll cook those things themselves. So the one problem was that the brother-in-law of Sanatana Goswami had given him that very nice blanket. And Sanatana Goswami could understand that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not approve of someone in the renounced order wearing such opulent clothing. So he went down to the river, and there was a very old mendicant who had a torn, you see them here, just patches sewn together, a blanket like that. He insisted that that old mendicant take his beautiful, new, valuable blanket, and he took the torn patchwork blanket from the mendicant and returned to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu like that. Now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is sending him to someone's house to get regular meals and to get new clothes. He rejected all of that. He wanted to live, now that all that he had gone through to become free from the jailer, now going through the jungle, almost getting killed by the dacoits. He wanted to be strictly in the renounced order. So he didn't accept even the food and the clothing that was offered to him at the house of Lord Chaitanya's friend. When Lord Chaitanya saw all this, he was pleased. But Sanatan sensed that his valuable blanket did not please the Lord. So he traded the new blanket for an old one. This pleased Lord Chaitanya, who said, "Now you are completely renounced. Your last attachment is gone by the mercy of Krishna." Sanatan submitted himself at the lotus feet of Lord Caitanya and said, I have wasted my time in sense gratification. I am low-born, and I have low association. I have no qualifications for spiritual life. I do not even know what is actually beneficial for me. People say that I am learned, but I am fool number one, because although people say I am learned, and although I accept it, still I do not know who I am. Keami. I don't even know who I really am, but I'm thinking I'm a learned person. Sanatan presented himself as a blank slate, and he inquired from the Lord, who am I? Why am I in this material world? Why am I suffering? Prabhupada emphasized that this was the perfect way for a disciple to accept a spiritual master. So even Lord Caitanya, in front of his guru, Ishwara Puri, he presented himself as a fool. And Ishwara Puri told him that you're not qualified to study the Vedanta. You simply chant this mantra that I've given you, and you will get all spiritual realization. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Supreme Lord himself, in the form of a devotee, he presented himself as a fool before his spiritual master and followed the instructions of his spiritual master. And when the sannyasis headed by Prakashananda Saraswati in Benares inquired from him that why are you chanting and dancing like a, what's it called? Baruka. A sentimentalist. I forget the name in Bengali. He explained that my spiritual master called me a fool. He said not to study the Vedanta, but to simply chant Hare Krishna. That's because Lord Caitanya, he was introducing the Yuga Dharma of Sankirtan. So therefore, he propagated the chanting of Hare Krishna rather than the study of Vedanta. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu understood the Vedanta perfectly. Later, when he was in Jagannath Puri, and the head of the teacher of all of the sannyasis in Puri, that was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he feared that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being so young and attractive, would not understand the philosophy properly. For 7 days, he spoke the Vedanta Sutra to Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya was silent the entire time. And Sarvabhauma inquired from him that, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand this philosophy? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him, I understand the Vedanta very clearly, but I don't understand how you're explaining it. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was not a fool, but in front of his spiritual master, he presented himself as a fool, as did Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami. You see in Sanatana Goswami's mouth, there's some straw. So that is an expression of humility. The first time they met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramakeli, they put straw in their mouth and from a distance offered their obeisances to him. Babuka, that's what it is, a sentimentalist. Correct? Yes. After narrating the story of Sanatan's joining Lord Chaitanya, Prabhupada began lecturing on the Lord's teachings to Sanatan. Lord Chaitanya first explained that the living being is not the material body, but an eternal living soul within the body. Then for 2 months, Lord Chaitanya instructed Sanatan, revealing to him the deepest and most sublime philosophical truths of Vedic wisdom. He enlightened Sanatan regarding the soul and its relationship with Krishna, the nature of the material and spiritual worlds, the characteristics of a fully realized soul, and the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna and his unlimited forms, expansions, and incarnations, and divine pastimes. And all of these instructions are given by Krishnadas Kaviraj in the Caitanya Charitamrita, so that we can get the same benefit that Sanatana Goswami received hearing these esoteric truths from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally. He explained the superiority of the path of Bhakti Yoga over the paths of philosophical speculation and yogic mysticism. And he revealed to Sanatan the esoteric knowledge of spiritual ecstasy experienced by those souls who have achieved pure love for Krishna. These teachings of the Lord were like an ocean that overflooded the mind of Sanatana Goswami with its sweetness and grandeur. When Lord Chaitanya had finished instructing Sanatan, he gave Sanatan the benediction that all those sublime teachings would be fully manifested within his heart, thus enabling him to compose transcendental literature. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sent Sanatan to Vrindavan. And there in Vrindavan, under a different tree every night, he was writing the literatures, and how they would write is on palm leaves, etching with a sharp instrument, etching into the palm leaves and then putting the ink. You can see the writings of the Goswamis at the Vrindavan Research Institute just down the road here. Sanatana Goswami wrote so many books. Some of them are available now, such as Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Krishna Stava Leela, many, many books written by him. Some of them are in Samadhi. If you go to the new Radha Madan Mohan temple, there is a Grantha Samadhi there, because some of the works of the Goswamis were lost. They're in Samadhi still. Now they're in Samadhi. But the major works of Sanatana Goswami are still available to this day for us to take advantage of. For 2 months, Lord Chaitanya had instructed Sanatana Goswami, and for 2 months, starting in mid-November of 1966, Srila Prabhupada narrated in over 50 lectures the Caitanya Charitamrita's account of those teachings. Although each of his talks covered the subject matter of the verses, his lectures were never limited to his subject, nor were they prepared talks. So Srila Prabhupada, at the same time, while he was paraphrasing the Bengali verses of Caitanya Charitamrita, he was also instructing his new disciples how to incorporate Krishna consciousness into their lives. And you'll hear that. For instance, the story of Sanatana Goswami, when he was living here at the hill where the Madan Mohan temple is, he was meditating, and the deity of Madan Gopal, who had been worshipped by Advaita Charya, originally was at the bottom of the hill, but that deity was given to a Brahmin in Mathura, a Chaturvedi, a Chobeji. And as Sanatana Goswami would be wandering throughout Braj, he happened to come to the home of that Chobeji, and he saw how the deity was being not worshipped, he was being treated just like one of the children in the family of that Brahmin. The children were playing with the deities just as if he were their friends. And Sanatana Goswami, he said that how you can work, this is an original deity coming from the time of Vajranabha Maharaj, you're treating him just like one of your children. So Sanatana Goswami took that, put it on the Dasas Aditya Tila here, and was worshipping. And that deity used to speak to him, because when he would go for Madhukori, he would just get some atta, and he would mix that atta with Jamuna water. He would make a little fire, roll that atta into balls, and throw the atta into the fire until it baked. They're called batis, right? He didn't even have any salt. It was just Jamuna water and atta. So one day, Madan Gopal said to him, "Can you at least give me a little salt?" And Sanatana Goswami, he said, "Today you're asking for salt. Tomorrow you'll ask for a sweet. I'm a sannyasi. You have to be satisfied with whatever I get." So he wouldn't even give him any salt. So what Madan Mohan did was, there was, in those days, all of the ghats, the Kaliya Ghat, that's where the Jamuna was flowing in those days, and boats would come along that river, the Jamuna River. So there was a big barge coming from upstream, from Delhi, and it was a merchant from Agra. And in his barge, in his boat, he was carrying salt. So the boat got stuck right at the bottom of the hill. And the merchant didn't know how to get his boat free. So a little boy was playing there. The little boy was Madan Mohan. And the man asked the little boy, "Can you tell me how do I get my boat free? Can you call some people to help me?" And the little boy said, "You just go on top of the hill there, and there's one Sanatan Baba. He will help you." So, because Madan Mohan wanted a little bit of salt, he arranged that a whole boat of salt be delivered right at the bottom of the hill. And the merchant was so grateful, because Sanatana Goswami was able to get the boat free, that he built the temple of Madan Mohan. So these are the pastimes. So Srila Prabhupada, when he was installing the deity, I think it was in Los Angeles, he told that story, and tears came to his eyes. This beautiful exchange between Sanatana Goswami and Madan Gopal. All right, we're way past time today, I'm sorry. We'll continue next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.